Some phone calls change your schedule. Others quietly change your life. When my phone rang that Tuesday evening, I assumed it was another employee asking for help with a late project. Instead, the caller ID displayed a name I never expected to see after business hours. Victoria Lawson, CEO, my boss. The woman who somehow remained calm while running one of the country's largest manufacturing companies. I answered immediately. Good evening. She didn't bother with formalities. Daniel, are you busy this Saturday? I smiled. Hello to you too. She laughed softly. I deserve that. So, are you? I looked across the kitchen. My 7-year-old daughter Chloe stood on a chair wearing an oversized pink apron covered in flour. She was carefully decorating chocolate cupcakes with colorful sprinkles. Friday nights belonged to us. Actually, every evening belonged to us whenever possible. After my wife died, I promised myself no promotion would ever become more important than being Chloe's father. It depends, I replied. On what? Whether my assistant approves my schedule. Chloe looked up. Who's that? I covered the phone. My boss. She smiled proudly. Tell her I'm making cupcakes. Victoria overheard and laughed. I guess that answers my question. My name is Daniel Harper. Since that day, I kept that promise the best I could. Every Friday, we baked something together. Cookies, brownies, cupcakes. It didn't matter. The kitchen became our place to laugh. Sometimes we burned everything. Sometimes the recipe worked perfectly. Either way, Chloe always declared our creations restaurant quality. Life wasn't luxurious. It didn't need to be. Teaching Chloe kindness mattered far more than buying expensive things. Every morning before school, she slipped handwritten notes into my work bag. One read, "You're my favorite grown-up." Another simply said, "Remember to smile today." Those tiny pieces of paper stayed inside my wallet long after the ink began fading. Victoria cleared her throat on the phone. I actually called because I need a favor. I had a feeling. She hesitated. My ex-fiancée is getting married this weekend. Daniel blinked. I'm not sure whether congratulations is appropriate. She laughed. It's complicated. I've been invited. And my board of directors insists I shouldn't attend alone. I frowned. What does that have to do with me? They've suggested introducing me to investors, politicians, executives. I'd rather spend one evening with someone genuine. Silence. Then she quietly asked, "Would you attend with me?" I honestly thought she was joking. As your date. As my guest. If people assume more, I'm willing to let them. I slowly sat down. Victoria, I'm your employee. I know. This isn't about work. It's about surviving one awkward wedding. Before I answered, Chloe climbed into my lap. Who's getting married? I smiled. My boss's friend. Victoria gently corrected me. My ex-fiancée. Chloe tilted her head. Does that make her sad? Victoria became quiet. A little. Children have a remarkable ability to ask the questions adults avoid. Chloe smiled into the phone. My daddy gives the best hugs. Daniel felt his face turn bright red. Victoria laughed harder than she had all week. I'll keep that in mind. The call ended without an answer. She gave me 2 days to think. Wednesday morning began like every other. I arrived at Lawson Industries before sunrise. Despite leading thousands of employees, Victoria still walked through the factory floor every Wednesday. She greeted technicians by name, asked warehouse workers about their families, remembered birthdays. It was one reason people respected her. She led with consistency instead of intimidation. Around lunchtime, she appeared outside my office carrying 2 coffees. I brought a peace offering. I haven't even answered yet. I know. She smiled. I'm trying not to pressure you. They walked toward a quiet courtyard behind the headquarters. For several minutes, they simply talked. Not about quarterly profits. Not about production targets. About Chloe. About gardening. About favorite books. Eventually, Daniel asked the obvious question. Why me? Victoria looked toward the fountain. Because everyone else sees my title first. You don't. You argue with me. You tell me when I'm wrong. You've never treated me differently because I'm CEO. She smiled. That's rare. Daniel thought carefully before answering. I don't know anything about billionaire parties. I wasn't asking for a billionaire. She looked directly into his eyes. I was asking for Daniel. That answer stayed with him the rest of the day. Thursday evening, Chloe helped him choose a suit. She rejected 3 ties before approving a dark blue one. You look handsome. I look nervous. She giggled. That's different. As Daniel tucked Chloe into bed that night, she asked quietly, Daddy, yes. Mommy liked helping people. She did. I think she'd want you to help your boss. Daniel smiled. I think you might be right. He kissed her forehead and turned off the bedroom light. Standing alone in the hallway, he finally made his decision. He would go. Not because the CEO had asked. Not because it might impress anyone. But because sometimes the strongest thing one person can do for another is simply make sure they don't have to face a painful day alone. What Daniel didn't know was that the wedding would become far more than an uncomfortable afternoon. Because before the reception ended, Victoria would make one unexpected decision in front of hundreds of guests. A decision that would leave her ex-fiancé speechless and change both of their lives forever. Saturday morning arrived with bright sunshine and surprisingly calm skies. Daniel adjusted the cuffs of his navy blue suit while Chloe circled him like a tiny fashion critic. She folded her arms and nodded seriously. You look fancy. I feel uncomfortable. She laughed. Fancy people probably always feel uncomfortable. Daniel smiled. You may be right. A few minutes later, Victoria arrived at his townhouse herself instead of sending a driver. She wore an elegant emerald green dress that was sophisticated without being flashy. When Chloe opened the front door, her eyes grew wide. You look like a princess. Victoria smiled warmly. And you must be Chloe. Chloe nodded proudly. I'm the cupcake helper. I've heard wonderful things about you. Before they left, Chloe hugged her father tightly. Remember what Mommy always said. Daniel smiled. What was that? Kind people never have to pretend. Victoria quietly heard those words. They stayed with her the entire drive. The wedding was held at a beautiful vineyard overlooking rolling hills. Luxury vehicles filled the parking area. Guests in designer clothing mingled beneath white floral arrangements, while photographers captured every elegant detail. As soon as Victoria stepped from the car, whispers spread through the crowd. That's Victoria Lawson. She actually came. Who's the man with her? Daniel noticed curious glances from every direction. He leaned toward Victoria. I think people are staring. She smiled calmly. They're always staring. Today they're simply curious. Inside the reception hall, Daniel finally met the groom. Ethan Mercer. Tall. Confident. The conversations quickly shifted toward business. Several executives approached Victoria one after another. I'd like to thank everyone for celebrating with us. He smiled toward Victoria. And I'd especially like to thank an old friend for attending despite our history. Polite applause followed. Then Ethan added with a grin. I'm glad you finally found someone willing to keep up with your work schedule. Several guests laughed. The joke sounded harmless. But Daniel noticed the sadness behind Victoria's smile. She had heard comments like that before. Without hesitation, Daniel quietly stood. May I say something? The room fell silent. Victoria looked surprised. Daniel lifted his glass. I've only known Victoria professionally for a short time. But I've learned something important. He looked around the room. Most people admire her because she built an extraordinary company. I admire her because every Wednesday she walks the factory floor and knows employees by name. She remembers birthdays. She visits sick workers in hospitals. She personally funds scholarships for children whose parents work at the company. He smiled at Victoria. The world sees a CEO. I've had the privilege of seeing a genuinely kind person. The ballroom became completely quiet. Even Ethan lowered his eyes. Victoria looked overwhelmed. Then, without warning, she did something no one expected. She walked across the room, took Daniel's hand, and instead of returning quietly to her seat, she leaned forward and kissed him gently on the cheek. The entire ballroom gasped. Camera flashes filled the room. Victoria smiled through happy tears. For years, I believed success meant proving something to everyone who doubted me. She looked directly at Ethan. Today I realized something different. She turned toward Daniel. The greatest success is finding people who value your character more than your accomplishments. She squeezed Daniel's hand. And that's exactly what I found. The applause began slowly. Then nearly every guest stood. Even Ethan smiled respectfully. After the reception, Daniel and Victoria walked quietly through the vineyard gardens beneath strings of glowing lights. Daniel laughed. You know, I wasn't expecting that. The kiss. Definitely the kiss. She smiled. I wasn't either. They stopped beside a small fountain. Victoria looked at him honestly. Thank you. For what? For reminding me I never needed to impress anyone who couldn't appreciate who I already was. Daniel smiled. You already knew that. I just happened to say it out loud. Several months later, their friendship slowly became something deeper. There were no dramatic announcements. No headlines. Just shared dinners, weekend outings with Chloe, and countless ordinary moments that quietly. Sometimes it's the unexpected courage of someone who finally chooses kindness over pride, authenticity over appearances, and a future over the past. And for Daniel and Victoria, one invitation to an ex-fiancé's wedding became the first chapter of the happiest story either of them ever lived.